As always, please retry this question before watching the video. There are two things you need to know before answering this question. If you don't know them, add them to your cheat sheet, master them, and go back 5 before continuing in the video. First thing you need to know, should names have punctuation around them? Surprisingly, on the ACT, almost never. Very rarely on the ACT should you have punctuation around names. And we'll talk about there are exceptions to that, and you need to know how to recognize those exceptions. But the vast majority of the time on the ACT, you should not have or you're not going to have punctuation around the name. So err on the side of not putting punctuation around the name when you're on the ACT. Next, how do you tell if a name needs punctuation around it? It is if it is necessary to understand or for it to be an independent clause. Okay, if it's necessary for it to be an independent clause. And the way that you tell that it's necessary, usually they will have an article somewhere earlier for the noun if it is non-essential. So if it said something like where an invertebrate conservation expert, or where the invertebrate conservation expert took charge of them, where the lead conservative expert took charge of them, then Patrick Honan would not be essential because they would have an article or some other way of telling us exactly which conservation expert we're talking about. And since it doesn't have that article, the name is essential to understanding which conservation expert we are talking about for this to be an independent clause. And therefore, it is going to not have commas around it in this scenario, as in the vast majority of names on the ACT where they're not going to have punctuation around them. So, because there is no article making expert complete in itself, so we know which expert we're talking about, then Patrick Honan is essential information and therefore should not have punctuation around it. That allows us to eliminate answer A, which has a comma after the name, which that would just be punctuation in the middle of the clause either way, because if you were going to have the name with the punctuation, it would need to be on both sides, signifying it as a parenthetical, non-essential information that isn't actually there. Answer B is the hardest one to choose between. If you got this wrong, it's probably the one that you chose, but you got to know the majority of the time, not going to have punctuation around the name, and there is no article earlier, like the or an or something signifying which expert or making expert a noun of itself. We need Patrick Honan to know which expert we're talking about. So answer B we can eliminate because we need his name to understand which one we're talking about. C is punctuation in the middle of a clause. Doesn't have it after, so it's just wrong in general. And D is going to be our correct answer. If this made sense to you, please add it to your worksheet. Write your explanation on the backside that will make sense to you in months to come, along with the correct answer. And then go ahead and do the remaining Clause 1 questions that you missed on this test. If this is the last Clause 1 question that you missed on this test, please do the mastery until you get 10 correct in a row on the Clause 1 mastery before going on to the next category that you missed the most of.